Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I'm, as introduced, Maciej, core dev at Parity, primarily focusing on the relay chain logic. And to be more precise, the parachain consensus protocol part. This is the logic that essentially aggregates all the parachains together, validates them, and makes sure they create a coherent state on the relay chain. So today we'll be focusing on Agile Coretime. There was a few talks about it. I'll be trying to give an overview of all the different features and how it plays together. So to give a little bit of a sneak peek, this will be a high-level talk, but I think it's a good thing. There is a lot of buzz around Coretime, a lot of opinionation, a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different agents in the ecosystem presenting different stuff. So I'll be trying to present the relatively unopinionated, unbiased, condensed state and summary of how things look, what's the roadmap, and what can we actually expect. So I think it is valuable to see while Agile Coretime lives in the high-level roadmap for Polkadot. Generally speaking, we have the Polkadot 1.0. This is the original white paper, what was initially expected by Gav and others to actually be the whole system. But then slowly the community realized there are some things not covered in the white paper that we still want to have in the actual project. So we introduced stuff like asynchronous backing and stuff like Agile Coretime. Those things now are generally quoted as the Polkadot 2.0. And later down the line, as most of you are probably aware already, there's the Polkadot 3.0. This is the Jam stuff. And Jam, I heard a lot of confusions like, what is Jam, what is Coretime, how do they relate to each other? And generally speaking, Coretime is a prerequisite for Jam. But Coretime will land even before Jam, and we'll be able to use it in Polkadot 2.0. Some parts of it are already live in Kusama. And the good way of thinking about Jam is, what Jam allows us is to just have extra logic. We can still do all the things we were able to do in the network and some extra stuff on top. It's an expansion of the system, of the protocol. Parachains are still there. Substrate is still there. All of those are still crucial to Jam. So now going back to the Coretime stuff. So let's address the first small misconception. What is the difference between block space and Coretime? And generally speaking, they're very similar. They're two sides of the same coin. Coretime is just Polkadot's method of allocating block space, of consuming block space. If you buy Coretime on Polkadot, in the end, what you get is block space on Polkadot. So, but there's a reason why we use the Coretime narrative. And this name is like that for a specific purpose. So when we talk about Coretime, as the name suggests, we are talking about a specific time spent on a specific core time. But what are those cores? What are those execution cores, in fact? So Polkadot fundamentally is a sharded system. What it means in short is that we run a bunch of different processes in parallel as parallel blockchains, parachains. And when we do run those parallel tasks, we say that they run on separate execution core. Each parachain, each task sits and occupies an individual execution core. They're mapping one-to-one. And each execution core can process a single parachain block every 6 seconds. This is the bundle of data of all the transactions coming in from the outside world and getting processed by the relay chain. And a single processed parablock, what it actually means is 2 seconds of execution and 5 megabytes of data availability. This is what we actually mean by block space, is a combination of those two properties. But the important thing is, 2 seconds of computation, that's not the unique part. The unique part is we are getting consensus on that execution. It's a part of this decentralized network, and all the nodes verify the correctness of the state transition, the correctness of this execution. Because if you want to build a truly resilient application, then you cannot just run this execution on a small Raspberry Pi alone. It's not resilient. But in our case, because all those nodes spread around the world get consensus on it, we can actually start building resilient apps. And this 2 seconds of execution is significantly more valuable than a 2 seconds of execution on a similar machine in your basement. So to summarize, what I want you to know is that whenever you hear about Polkadot cores, just think that they guarantee you a certain amount of compute every 6 seconds. This is fundamentally what they do. So if we have 200 cores in Polkadot, fundamentally what it does is it just creates this big virtual machine that is capable of hosting 400 seconds of execution time in the span of 6 seconds, spread around all those machines. But if we have this powerful virtual machine with all this compute, then it needs to be somehow exposed to the applications living on top of it. Just like AWS has to somehow expose the data centers it has, the fundamental hardware, it needs to be scheduled. The tasks, the applications living on it needs to be scheduled onto it. And different tasks can pay and they can consume different amount of resources, different amount of block space, and their needs can vary a lot. So how was the scheduling actually handled and done in Polkadot 1.0? So 1.0 scheduling was centered around the concept of leases. Leases were a mapping of individual cores to a specific task, one-to-one, for a very, very long time, generally 2 years. And leases were purchased on candle auctions, but the thing is, they were really expensive, at least upfront. You had to prepare a huge amount of funds very quickly. You had to usually get back to your community, try to incentivize them to provide you the funds through the means of a crowd loan. It was a big overhead. There was a lot of management around it. And imagine getting a bunch of devs and telling them, OK, you need to get $2 million to fund this blockchain, get the crowd loan, and only then you can start actually building. Like, it's a huge barrier of entry. So over the lifespan of the system, we realized, and the community realized, that those issues are there. And the simplest one being that this whole scheme was good at the beginning. It was simple, but it's just inflexible. It's addressing a very specific business model and none of the other ones. And most teams were committing to the extremely long 2 years periods, and there was little room for experimentation. There was little room for the little guys actually trying things out and possibly failing, but at least trying things out. And the DOT resources needed to actually take part in the auctions were extremely high. So it was creating very high ceilings for teams that actually needed throughput, very low ceilings for teams that needed throughput, and very high barriers of entry for the teams that just wanted to try things out. So Polkadot 2.0 aims to address those shortcomings by a new scheduling system, Agile Coretime. And on a high level, Agile Coretime is just a more flexible way of allocating tasks, parachains, onto the underlying Polkadot cores. And there are a few specific tenets that generally it tries to adhere to. The main goal is to just use the underlying block space more efficiently, actually allocate it to tasks that really need it, lowering the barriers of entry, raising the ceiling for the applications that need a higher throughput. But undeniably, there is still one property we cannot forget about, and it's one of the reasons why many teams migrated to Polkadot: stability, price stability. We still need to somehow maintain this stability, because this is one of the big things that brought people to Polkadot. So then what are the actual main Agile Coretime features? But before even I go to that, it's already a bit of a misconception. Agile Coretime is not this one big coherent blob. It's a bunch of different features bundled together, and all of them generally unlock this flexibility that we need for the devs to actually build much more easily. It's not just one thing that can be deployed and forgot. So I'll give you a very quick walkthrough of all those features here, but generally speaking, they can be separated into two categories: either ways of acquiring Coretime or ways of manipulating Coretime. So the first one we'll be looking at is bulk Coretime auctions. This is generally the method that's replacing the old slot auction model. And this is a nice little table summarizing all the core differences. But the one I want you to focus on the most is the old model was generally creating leases that lasted for 2 years. The new one, generally speaking, creates 28-day-long periods of time. If you buy bulk Coretime on the Coretime auctions, what you're getting is 28 days of consecutive Coretime, every 6 seconds for 28 days. But there is an important requirement that we wanted to have some stability. So there is an optional renew ability. And Donald, today on the talk, I think afternoon, will be diving deeper into pricing and renewals. So hopefully, we'll get more insights on that. And additionally, the method of payment is also changing a bit and likely being simpler. The tokens spent on the auctions originally were just locked for a period of time. So the real cost the teams were paying was the difficulty of getting those funds from the community and locking them, essentially foregoing the profits. It was an opportunity cost. Right now in Coretime, system is much simpler. You have the cost you're paying upfront, the tokens get burned. There's no extra complexity around it. You just need to monitor the prices and make your purchases as you see fit. So let's actually take a look at, because there's one extra thing. When you were originally in the leases, when you actually bought one, if you wanted to transfer it to a different party, into a different project, you had to go through governance, try and figure out, move it to a different power ID. It was an extra friction for the teams. The new, the way it's organized right now is if you actually win a bulk auction, what you're getting is a region. It's an NFT-like structure that allows you to transfer it between parties to actually edit it and modify it slightly. It's somewhat programmable. So let's actually take a look at them. Let's see what you can change about them, how they can be programmable. So the main thing is, if you actually bought it and just schedule it without modifying, what you would get is a block every 6 seconds for 28 days. This is the bare bones, very similar to the old style stuff. But if you start editing it, what you can do is you can interlace it. And with interlacing, you can schedule multiple parachains, multiple tasks onto the same core. Effectively, what we can do is we can have two parachains taking turns on a single core. This will affect their block time, but it also might significantly reduce their costs, which in turn satisfy the need of actually allocating block space efficiently. And it's not just limited to 2 parachains. If you want to have 3 parachains sharing a core, sure thing. If you want to have a parachain that creates a block every 50th of a slot, you can do it. It's very flexible, and all of that is exposed to teams to play with. And as I mentioned, if you'll be sharing a core with someone else, it would be nice to have a place to interact with them, to potentially find this other team, this other parachain you can share the core with. So we need some kind of a secondary market where you can interact with those parties. And the big thing is, secondary markets in Agile Coretime, it's not a secondary thought. It's not an afterthought we had to, oh God, we need to make them to make the system work. They're a primary objective of building the system, of giving back the flexibility away to the community so they can interact and they can trade it in whatever way they need. If they want to create derivatives around it, they can. If they want to make an order book around it, they can. It gives the power back to the community so they can actually have all the flexibility they wanted to have. And I think Phil was making a very nice distinction yesterday that this is not possible in other blockchains. It's essentially a way of tokenizing gas, of tokenizing block space, which is just not possible in other places. So it's opening a lot of new avenues. So, and we have right now 2 main actors in the ecosystem actually allowing building those interfaces for secondary markets. It's Lastic and RegionX. Hopefully, all of you are familiar with them, and I definitely recommend checking those out. They will be opening a lot of functionality to buy Coretime, trade it, manipulate it, create orders for it, automate your renewals. So this will be probably the primary way of interacting with Agile Coretime. And now let's quickly take a look at OnDemand Coretime. So fundamentally, it is trying to address the limitation of Coretime regions. They need to be set up in advance. And what if we don't know if we need a core in 5 minutes? What if we cannot predict how much demand we will have in 10 hours? In those cases, what we truly need is a low latency way of acquiring block space, of acquiring core time. And OnDemand is specifically tailoring for those low latency situations. So OnDemand, what it actually allows you is simply to buy a single block's worth of core time on a very, very low latency, usually 6 to 12 seconds. It's somewhat similar to AWS Spot or any cloud computing spots, for those that are familiar with it. And one small caveat about it, you need to have your WASM pre-registered on chain to use it. It's right now pretty expensive to do it. There are currently very solid discussions around lowering this fee significantly to yet again remove another point of friction for the teams to be able to deploy and build quicker and experiment as much as they can. And OnDemand will be best suited for teams that want to create very temporary parachains, experimentation, and teams that just don't need that much block space but still care about latency. And it has very, very nice quirks in combination with elastic scaling, and I'll get to that in a second. So, elastic scaling, what does it actually do? So, another situation, another user story. What if we have a single core? What if we're a parachain occupying a single core, but it's just not enough for us? We need more block space. Well, in that case, elastic scaling is a feature targeting that. It's a feature focusing on high throughput systems, high throughput applications in Polkadot. If we have a situation with 3 cores, let's say that parachain A is essentially reaching its limit. It's utilizing all of its block space. It's getting totally bottlenecked. But we have this other core, core number 2, which is just sitting empty, and it's just asking for it. What if we just schedule this parachain and let it occupy both cores? And with elastic scaling, this is exactly what we will be able to do. And it will significantly increase the block space throughput for those teams, and as well, it can reduce your average block time. It doesn't change your finality block time, but if you care about block production and inclusion, on average, you will be pushing more blocks out, which can be very, very meaningful for gaming applications or applications that do care about this quick block production, which can be optimistically included in the user applications. So another thing is all of this functionality will be, most of this functionality will be residing on a new system parachain called Coretime Chain or Broker Chain. This is where the bulk auctions will be hosted. This is where you can send your extrinsics if you want to interact directly and manipulate your Coretime. But don't worry, all of that will be integrated with interfaces like Elastic and RegionX, which will be essentially operating on top of that chain to make this, to streamline this process as much as possible. There are some things still living on the relay chain, for instance, OnDemand, because for OnDemand, what we care is latency. We want to make it as quick as possible. So having this logic on the relay chain allows us to even further remove the delays of actually acquiring that block space. So the thing I like the most about all of those different features is the sum of them together produces even greater results. And the favorite combination is Elastic plus OnDemand. Imagine you have a big parachain that sits, generally speaking, sufficiently using a single core. They don't need 2 cores all the time, but sometimes they make a big NFT drop, something is happening, and at that point, they can schedule an automatic on-demand order when the block space, when they fully start filling up the blocks, which would order them a few blocks in on-demand, and they would get automatically potentially queued into Elastic. So temporarily, when they have high demand, they will get 2 cores. When the demand drops again, they elastically drop down back to a single core, which is giving a lot of freedom, and yet again, is just helping us make sure that the block space is not wasted. Because otherwise, this team would be forced to just potentially buy 2 cores if Elastic would be there without OnDemand, and often this extra space would just be wasted. So we need the combination of all of them to play together. Another interesting interaction is between bulk auctions and OnDemand. OnDemand has a specific pool of cores that will be used for OnDemand purchases, and it has a separate pricing model compared to bulk auctions. So if it is the case that OnDemand has a very, very high demand and the price actually starts skyrocketing, some people, probably bots, will notice that and they will start arbitraging, buying bulk core time and moving that, contributing that to the on-demand pool to lower the prices. So they hopefully will equalize. And a few roadmap stuff. So big chunk of that is already live in Kusama. Bulk auctions, you can play with them. There is a bunch of cores sold already. Renewals were happening already. Marketplaces like Elastic and RegionX are already interactable. This is how those teams actually bought the cores in Kusama. And we are generally aiming for a Polkadot release, hopefully within the next month. And the other features like OnDemand is live on testnets, And elastic scaling, hopefully, the first version, the MVP, will be released this month and will be available on testnets. And a disclaimer on the MVP, what it is exactly is the same functionality is there. You can have multiple cores for a single parachain, but it will require, for now, either a big chunky collator or a closed collator set. Then we will push out the second iteration of elastic scaling, which will focus on opening the collator set, so we can actually have all the benefits with any of the drawbacks. And that is pretty much it. So if there are any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll be around after the talk as well, if anyone wants to discuss it further.
Woo. Maciej, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the presentation myself. Other questions from the audience? We do have a hot mic that can go around. Yes, please.
Thank you. I get a question. So I'm from latency parachain. I want to know, because we currently have the parachain leasing period close to 2 years to go. And when this Coretime come to production alive, what will happen to the parachain?
Very good question. I'm sure Donna will give you even more insight about that, but to answer that quickly is you can continue with your lease until it ends without any concerns. You are not forced to migrate to the new system. You will be smoothly grandfathered into the new system. When your lease eventually ends, you will get 1 month of Coretime for free, and then you will be able to participate in the next auctions as normal as any other users in the system. You have an option to migrate early, which can potentially be beneficial and allow you to secure a good pricing early. And I didn't get into it that much, but renewals have some price guarantees, so it doesn't go too high. You essentially can predict how much your prices will raise over time. So migrating to Coretime early might be feasible for some teams that are maybe a bit more open to experimenting with it and locking in this nice price early.
Can I understand in a different way? If we migrated to Coretime earlier, and then for the dots we already locked there, how about the lock period?
Mm-hmm. So as far as I'm aware, they will continue to be locked until the lease ends.
Okay, but then at the same time, if we migrate to the Coretime, and do we need to pay extra for during this leasing period?
Yes. If you migrate to Coretime early, you will have to pay extra. There might be some opportunities to maybe try and sell off your lease through governance to a different team. Might not be the most feasible option, but the benefit of doing, yes, you will be overpaying for a bit of time, like double paying, but the benefit is that if you are able to secure a low enough price for renewals, it might be worth it. It's a matter of calculating what is your risk appetite for your team, and if you're able to migrate early. It might be more beneficial to secure a lower price than to... It might overweigh double paying.
But when we have this migrate happen, then this price is open to the market. Everybody will jump to this open market to buy, and then we are competing with everybody. And then we finally find a price in the middle. Is there any extra benefits to have this lower price, or actually it's same as?
I mean, if you can secure a lower price, then you can continue renew for the next however much you want, and the price will slowly raise. Maybe the price of the market will raise even steeper than that, and then you essentially have a lower price than the market itself. If you migrate early, it's not a guarantee, but it can happen. Like, it's a matter of financial analysis, what works for your team.
Yeah, but...
very good question. I think we have another audience question here.
You can continue the discussion afterwards if you want.
Yeah, please. But very, very good questions, especially for the parachain teams that get affected by this new change.
Thank you. Hi. So I've been watching this on the Polkadot forums for a bit, and one of the things that I've seen come up on there was the manual renewal of Coretime. And going from a parachain slot that's programmed and then going to something that you have to renew every month. I also saw a talk about having a mechanism for automatic renewal for people. Is there an ETA on that? Is that something in development or just being considered for development?
So it's not something that will be part of the core protocol stuff, but it's definitely something that I expect, and I think I know is already being built by teams like Elastic and RegionX, and I'm very convinced that this will be happening. I don't have the ETA, but if you contact them, I'm sure they will be able to provide you more details. So Phil or Sergey from Region X. But yeah, it for sure will be happening.
Thank you.
It's not like every month you have to manually renew it. It's not feasible.
Yeah.
We know.
Great question. Thank you so much. And yeah, therefore, thank you again, Maciej. I think you will be around, so please continue the one-on-one discussion with him off stage.